Hey guys, welcome back to DASKA Discusses. Hope you've all had a great weekend. It's time to do another film, or a couple of film reviews, live film reviews. Why not indeed? Now, what we're going to be looking at tonight is Fear Street Part 1, Fear Street Part 2 and Part 3. Now, I was going to do these as like a separate kind of review like I did with Part 1. I reviewed Part 1 the other day and I put it live on my I put it on my channel just as a normal video. And then I thought, well, I should do Part 2 and Part 3. Do I do it in two separate videos? I'm like, nah, you know what? Let's do it all in one go, have a discussion over it, instead of sitting there playing Fortnite, which, would be fun. Still early, but nah. I thought, nah, I got to give the people what they want, and that is this. Let's talk about Fear Street Part 2 and Part 3. Now, just recapping on Part 1, I did give it a 5.5 out of 10, and I wasn't that impressed. No, I wasn't that impressed at all. So, let's start off with Fear Street Part 2, 1978. Just straight off the bat, let me just say this. This was definitely 100% an improvement on Part 1. Now, I told you about Part 1. They got me on the 1994. They got me on the nostalgia, the soundtrack and everything. They got me all on that in the first 20-25 minutes. But I told you about Part 1. I'm not going to go through it. I was disappointed by the end of Part 1. I'm like, this is actually not that good. It's disappointing that it's not that good. I wasn't happy. So, I sat down to see Part 2. And again, it starts off, again, no spoilers, obviously. But it starts off, exactly where Part 1 left off. And you meet a certain someone, and then there's a major flashback which takes you back to 1978. And then the synopsis, as it says here, Shady Side 1978. School's out for summer. The activities at Camp Nightwing are about to begin. But when another Shady Sider is possessed with the urge to kill, the fun in the sun becomes a gruesome fight for survival. Yeah, definitely a lot better than Part 1. And what can I say about this? Look, as an avid horror film fan, I can say this, that there were just major throwbacks to like the Friday the 13th series with Jason Voorhees, especially Part 2, Part 3, Part 2 mainly because he's got the sack on his head. The Shady Sider who gets possessed obviously ends up with a sack on his head. He's wielding an axe, very similar to Friday the 13th. Now, I must say though, the tone of this, and let's just look at the cast for a sec. Sadie Sink as Ziggy Bergman. That's the girl from Stranger Things, if you remember. Emily Rudd, she plays a really good role as her sister. There's Ryan Simpkins as Alice. Tommy Slater, this guy here, McCabe Sly, he actually plays a really good role as the villain, which was really interesting. And then you've got all these other smaller characters. And what's interesting is that what I found was, obviously a lot of the characters from Part 1, 1994, Fear Street, obviously not, they're in this version, but obviously they're younger selves. So the main protagonist being Ziggy Berman, she's the one that's telling our characters from 1994 the story about what's happened. Now, if you can't remember those characters, we'll go through them later because, they're in this movie a little bit, but the majority of 1978 obviously happens in 1978. Only maybe the start and the end go off. Now, what's interesting about this is that you find more information about the supernatural kind of story that this town's been having. You find out more information about what exactly happened, and a certain nurse at this, camp, this summer camp, is kind of like not obsessed about what happened in the past, but just trying to find out what happened with, this Fear person. Sam Fear, isn't it? I can't remember. Hang on one sec. So as it keeps going on, what I found was that it was definitely an improvement from Part 1, 100%. It is a lot more gruesome than Part 1, I must say, like really full on. So the first half an hour of the movie does tend to drag a little bit. But it is kind of like setting up for what's to come. So there is a really good setup for that. Like the characters, we know who they are, we know what's going on, we know this animosity between the two towns. They go into this thing called the color war. It's like capture the flag. So you've got the shady side and then the Sunny Vales, I think it's called. I can't remember. Yeah, they're both fighting for this, capture the flag. And at the same time, you've got a couple of characters who are trying to unearth this curse and find out more information about what's happened. Now, I don't want to really spoil it too much, but more secrets and more questions that you had from part 1 are answered, and that leads to a really full-on second half of the film where it's literally like taking a Friday the 13th film and putting it into this TV show, into this movie or telemovie, whatever you want to call it. So Netflix have done a good job with that, and I was very surprised with the amount of violence and gore in this, to be honest, for it to be a Netflix show. I mean, it's rated MA here in Australia, in America, so very, very full on. I'm talking when the killer's got his axe and he's swinging it down, you see everything in graphic detail, which I haven't seen on a Netflix original. I can't remember when, but it does remind me of those old 80s horror films, and that's what this is trying to do. It's trying to capture, late 70s, I don't know. No, it's based in the late 70s, but it does have that feel of Friday the 13th all over it, right? At the same time, though, it does pick up a lot, and there's a lot of interesting things happen. A lot of questions are answered about part 1. Yet, the one issue I had with it was when it got to the end, say the last act of the film, again, it kind of falls for this problem that part 1 had, where it's well, how are these rules? They're either broken or they're not broken. What are the set of rules we've got what we're going by? Then we find, basically, you got the last sequence where this major things happen to our main characters. And I was just at the end of part 2, when you're given kind of information about where certain things have been buried, etc. Again, I don't want to give away too much, but all I'm going to say is this. The whole movie was great. The first part was a bit of a drag, but then it really does pick up and gets a lot better. And there's some good action sequences, some good chase sequences, and the dialogue isn't as painful as in part 1. However, the last, say, 5 minutes of what happens, I actually physically we just went like that. I'm really? Did you really just do that? Did you really just do what? Is this how we're going in this direction? Now, actually, no, I'll take that back. Not so much the direction of the movie, but more so, I can't believe that just happened, right? So, and you'll know exactly what I mean when it gets to that point in the movie, when I'm just right at the end, this major thing just happens, and I'm just they really didn't just do that, and they did. And I'm just okay, well, that's taken my suspension of disbelief out. Now, I understand in films, obviously, there is a suspension of disbelief. There is no Thanos or Iron Man or whatever. But, when you've got violence in a film and you've got repercussions of someone getting punched, they get knocked out or they get stabbed, whatever, you kind of understand, okay, those are the rules of the game. When this major thing happens at the end of this film, it kind of takes all that and just says, oh yeah, no, we're not going to go through all that. So that was the one problem that I had with it, was just, it really just took me out of it. And that's a real shame, because it was looking good on my ratings, and then that happened. I'm just you know what? That kind of wrecked it for me in a way. So what do you do? Now, IMDb have given it a 6.8 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, we've got 89% tomato meter, and the audience score, which is 83%. Interesting. Look, I think the audience score could be about right. This is a bit too harsh. 6.8. So what I'm going to do is, I gave part 1 5.5. I think I'm going to go with part 2. I'll tell you what, it really was good, just apart from that last bit. But I'm going to go with just an 8 for this. It is very good, apart from maybe the first couple of, I don't know, the first few scenes where it just picks up, and then the last minutes. So an 8. 83 sounds about right. So 80 for me out of 100, or 8 out of 10 for Fear Street Part 2. Now, you can watch it on Netflix, obviously, but I would really, as you can see here, it's very violent. It goes for 1 hour, 51 minutes. The cast really does a good job. The acting, Ryan Simpkins, she does a really good role too. This guy here playing the young sheriff from Part 1. So Part 1 has the sheriff, Nick Good. This guy plays the younger version. And what's interesting is, not spoiling anything, but he actually plays a really good role. Sadie Sink does a really good role too. But in the end, I'm going to give Fear Street Part 2 a solid 8 out of 10 for me. Alright, so that's an 8 out of 10 for Fear Street Part 2. Now, let's look at Fear Street Part 3, shall we? So let's just type that into our little computer here. If you've got any questions, guys, let me know. Let me know what you thought in the chat. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing a live review. Because, that's why it's good to have a live review, because people can actually fill in with what they want to say. So if you're there, if you haven't seen it or you have seen it, let me know. So Fear Street Part 3, 1666. End the Curse. Now, what's interesting about Part 2 is that at the end, you've got our character from Part 1, which is Kiana Madeira, like Denny, or what was the name in Part 1? I can't remember. But she ends up, holding this kind of like skull hand, and then she's kind of like transported back into 1666. Or the whole thing is a flashback per se, right? She plays the role of Sarah Fear, okay? And what's interesting about it is that we've got a totally different setting here. Obviously, we've had 1994, 1978, but we've got our main character, right? The main character from Part 1 playing a entirely different character. So, you know what? Kiana Madeira in this did a really good job. I'm very surprised that in this 1666, I didn't know what to expect. But I'll tell you what, again, the way it starts, that whole flashback to the past. Now, what's interesting about it, guys, is that it's all about the origins of Fear's curse are finally revealed as history comes full circle on a night that changes the lives of Shadysiders forever. And this is not really spoiling, but the first half of the film is based in 1666, and I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was really well done. The cinematography was great. Production design was great. The acting from all of them involved was fantastic. Now you've got this guy Ashley Zuckerman playing Solomon Good, who is Nick Good's great grandfather or whatever. She's the adult Ziggy. Yeah, cool. Hannah Miller. So the real Seraphia. Yeah, it got the brother from Part 1 playing Seraphia's brother Henry. You've got the dad playing Seraphia's dad, this guy here, Randy Evans. You've got Lizzie. So you've got a lot of these people that were in Part 1 come back and reprise their role in 1666. But you've also got Sadie Sink, who plays a minor character in this 1666 film as well. This guy here, Maccabi Sly, I tell you what, don't know if I'm saying his name right, but this guy will be pretty big, I reckon. He's a really good actor, and especially in this 1666 film, I found he did a really good job. What I find is that he reminded me a bit of Robert Pattinson in a way, right? This 1666 film, the first half of it is based in 1666, and I must say, and I've said it before, I was very impressed how it all looked, the acting, the storyline was really interesting, how you've got the relationship between Sarah and her friend, and then, they're obviously lovers and they're caught, and then they're basically, like the townspeople, there's like a curse that's been happening, that one of the pastors, like the priest, kind of goes crazy and does something really nuts, and they're like, well, who do we blame for him going crazy? Well, yeah, witches. So we find out more about Seraphia and the curse that happened, and I must say there was some really good twists in this, and you find out all the information you need at this point in time of Sarah Fear and exactly what happened back in the past. So I was really impressed by that. Let's just look at some of the photos. Hopefully they're not too full on. Yeah, there is some really confronting scenes in this, but I'll tell you what, it does remind me a lot of a mixture of like Midsummer, The Wicker Man, all that kind of stuff, right? This guy plays a really good role. So the first half of the film in 1666, you find a lot of information, you find out what's going on. Again, I don't want to spoil it because if I keep clicking, it's actually going to spoil a lot, so I'm not going to do that. I must say, when you see, and this is not a spoiler because it's in the trailer as well, when you see Sarah Fear and the way she's killed and everything, and how she vouches to get her revenge and curse the townspeople, that was quite a confronting scene. And then the film, then probably halfway through, the 1666 setting kind of stops, and we're back in 1994 with our characters, right? Sarah Fear, or whatever her name was in part 1. Now, again, how do I put this, guys? Look, when it gets back to 1994, and you've got our Kiana Madeira, her character from part 1, which is not only Sarah, but what was her name in part 1? Hang on one sec. Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, you've got her finding out all this information, and well, they want to lift this curse somehow. I don't really want to spoil it because it's like pretty major spoilers, but put it this way. You've got our main character trying to lift this curse, and the plan, it's kind of like a mixture of the Goonies, Stranger Things. I know that's made recently, but it's just like a really interesting, and not interesting in a good way of going about lifting this curse. And basically all the monsters or possessed people that come back into this 1994 kind of era, and they have to stop this curse. So how do they do that? Well, with the information that we get from 1666, that's made evident. Again, can't get into it, but it involves the typical kind of horror trope where, someone is the key to something, and therefore, like, for example, blood. Someone's got blood, and all these monsters are sensed to that person's blood. So how do they use that to get their own way, to, like, build a trap, per se? That's not really spoiling much. I'm just telling you, like, that's what happens, right? But you don't know who I'm talking about or whatever. The problem we have there is that, I know I'm going to go on about it, but the character of, Kiana Madeira, I found that in the 1666 part of the film, she really does really well. But then going back to 1994, all the characters and all the things that I didn't enjoy from 1994 are brought back. The ridiculous set of rules, the bad acting, the bad dialogue, and just the real cheesy kind of way it ends. And like just some of the facepalm moments in this really spoiled it for me. So it's just a real hit and miss film for me, part 3. Like the first half of the film, when it's in that 1666 era, is just amazing. It's really good. But then it is just destroyed by this really convoluted plot that happens in the second half of the film that just, I get to trying to kill this curse, but it's not about how they killed. It's not about the characters trying to stop this curse. It's just about how it's done and the way they go about it. And if you can explain to me another way they could have done it, I get it, but it's just really just missed the mark with it turned out to be like something from the movie. I don't know if anyone's seen The Monster Squad, old 80s classic there. But I'll put it this way. Part 1, I gave it 5.5. Part 2, I gave it an 8. I thought it was fantastic. Part 3, I'm not kidding, started off, it was a 9.5, because the 1666 setting, how many times have I said this? How many times am I going to say this? It was really good, right? But then the second half, total disaster. Total disaster, well, look, they gave it a 6.8 here. In Rotten Tomatoes, they're giving it a 94% tomato meter and audience score of 84. Wow. Nah, no way. There is no way it's a 94. 54 reviews, 250. This sounds about right, but because of the second half. And you can have a look at the reviews, guys. I mean, I'm sure there's people that agree, disagree, whatever. It could have been great. That's pretty much what I say. People are complaining about the accents and all that. Look, I don't know exactly what happens in the books, guys. I haven't read the books, but going by 3 films in a trilogy, I'm impressed what Netflix have done, right, with this. And, you know, they've opened it up to potential spin-offs, I'm guessing 100%, because it is quite popular. But for it to be on Rotten Tomatoes, a 84 and then a 94 on the tomato meter, I think that's way off, unfortunately. It started off as a 9, but I'm going to give Fear Street Part 3 a 7.5 out of 10, 75% on my meter. So I gave Fear Street Part 1 5.5, didn't enjoy it at all. It was barely passable. Part 2 was the best one, an 8, and Part 3, 7.5. But if we had more of the older setting, it would have been higher. It's just the 1994 stuff killed it. So out of all this trilogy, what can I say is this, is that the 1994 stuff, I wanted it to be really good, but unfortunately, it just really didn't hit the mark at all. It's a real shame. But in summarizing it finally, right, they are definitely worth watching, right? There is nothing, they're definitely worth watching. But you got to remember this. Are you actually into horror? If you're into horror, you'll really enjoy them. If you're squeamish by like gruesome horror, probably not going to enjoy it. Do you like reading all the old R.L. Stone books? You'll enjoy it. If you are looking for something on Netflix that, is a bit different, but you're okay with blood and guts, fine, go ahead. So, final standings, Fear Street, Part 1, 5.5, Part 2, an 8, and Part 3, a 7.5 for me. I just thought this was a good way to do this, guys. We've been talking for 22 minutes. I will repost this on the page as well, obviously. But if you have any questions, or let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll definitely see you guys for another stream or another review. I'll try to think of other reviews to do. But yeah, just thought I'd do something more current and see what we can do. But yeah, Fear Street Part 2 and Part 3, you know what I just said. I didn't want to give away any spoilers. Make up your own minds. I've said what I've said. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments. And that's about it from me, guys. So I will see you guys on the next episode of DASKA Discusses. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you then. 3, 2,